Okay, good evening. This is the Wednesday, June 8, 2011 meeting of the Marlboro Township Ethics Board. Notice of this meeting has been made in accordance with the Sunshine Law of New Jersey, Open Public Meetings Act. It's been noticed. We call the meeting to order at 8:04 p.m. There's going to be a change on the agenda, which was distributed by email this week, and again distributed, and there's copies of the agenda if anyone would like up here, if you help yourself, if you'd like. Number 2, review of Ethics Board member potential conflict will be moved into Section 7, which is executive session to discuss personnel issues. We'll begin tonight by looking at the minutes of the last meeting, the March 9th and April 13th meetings. If anyone has any additions, deletions, corrections to the minutes, if not, we'll make a motion to accept the minutes.
I haven't received either of those. I don't know how I got taken off the list, but I haven't received that. I didn't receive the agenda either. So
you didn't receive the agenda?
No.
Here's March 9th, but you drafted March 9th.
Okay, then I've got it, but I never received it when it went out to everybody.
You have an agenda?
I haven't. You handed me one.
Here's March 9th.
Okay. And
take a moment to look at it if you feel comfortable with it.
The April one I know I didn't.
April was canceled. I'm not. There should not be April.
Well, he just said that's why I didn't receive it. It was canceled.
While we're waiting, I'd like to ask the gentleman who's filming the proceedings to introduce himself, please, and explain why he's tape recording it.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, first of all, legally I don't have to, but out of courtesy to the board, I will. My name is Mark Rosenwald. This is a public meeting.
Yes, sir.
Anybody from the public, according to the New Jersey Supreme Court, may record an open public meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Could you tell us why you're recording it?
No.
Did you get his name for the minutes? For the Thank you.
I've read it. I do need to give one apology in advance. My daughter-in-law is in surgery right now. I'm not sure whether they want us to go up there to St. Barnabas. If they do, I'm leaving.
Okay, I understand.
They tell me that, so
good luck with that. When you're done reviewing the minutes, just let us know, and we can make up any corrections, deletions, or otherwise. The keys.
yeah, we'll get to that.
Good or bad? You want to make a motion to accept the minutes on those two?
I have a question.
Yes.
On page 2, it states, after discussion, move to add the following paragraph to section 5. And it doesn't indicate what the result was of the motion, and the reason I raised it is I don't recall that it actually reached the point of being a motion, because I do recall that, because it was my first meeting, I said that if there was a motion, I didn't think it being my first meeting and not having the background that I'd be in a position to yet vote on it.
Which meeting is this? This is
This is the March 9th.
I don't remember a vote being taken either, because if so, we would have had to work on how we forward this to the DCA, and I don't remember that discussion.
I'll look at it again too. I don't have the copy in front of me. Yeah, I believe this was done during the workshop portion of the meeting, and I don't think that we would have moved to make that a resolution at this point. I think you're correct in saying that. Does anyone differ in that? I think it was a discussion that was held on this subject, and not necessarily.
We didn't formalize this.
Yeah, that's still under workshop.
So I'm going to make the minutes so reflect.
Yes, please. Liza, do you think that's what we're saying is accurate?
No, it definitely is. Because even Rabbi Weber had just sent out today or yesterday another
Wording, a new word.
Howie, I'm in a meeting. Can I call you later or tomorrow? Okay, thanks. Bye.
Make a motion that we make the corrected.
So I would move that we correct the minutes to reflect that there was discussion concerning the following paragraph. And then set forth the
And no
paragraph.
decision
Leave it at that.
was reached.
Correct.
That's what I remember.
Good point, thank you for bringing that up. Just give Andy a minute to word that properly. We'll distribute the minutes again for approval.
Okay, got it.
So I move to approve as corrected.
If you would read it back, well, you can make the motion, yeah. Why don't you do that, let him read it back, and we can vote on it right now.
Motion to approve the minutes as corrected.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? All in favor? Good. So moved. Any more contributions about the minutes? Are we okay going forward now? Okay, good. Okay, I'd like to see that we have some guests this evening, which always is pleasing to us. I'd like to open the floor for public voice. And if you'd be so kind as to, even though we know who most of you folks are, you're friends of ours and all, if you'd be so kind to introduce yourself for the record and please address the board.
Should I speak from my seat here?
Do whatever you feel. Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. My name is Paul Shacklin, 21 Stonehenge Way, Morganville. As the majority of the board is aware, I was the subject of an ethics complaint some 18 months ago, having to do with an admittedly vile and nasty email that I sent to the operators of an equally vile website. I have been notified that my appeal was successful and that the decision was overturned, although you can certainly review it and look to bring different charges if you please. But I'd like to make some observations and some comments here. First, to the attorney, I think you're a good guy, and I really, really appreciate that you were willing to come pro bono and help this board out, which is my understanding. And that's a really noble thing. You know, I volunteer for a lot of things in town, I give of my time, and I appreciate when other people do it. Certainly an attorney, you know, you have some big numbers for your billable hours that you spend on this. But I got to tell you, my belief and my position in this right along. And if you recall, and it was thrown up many times, one of my first statements to this board was that, gentlemen, you're on a very slippery slope. Indeed, it was a nasty, vile email, and it was hard to take if you weren't real familiar with the situation. But beyond that, it did not violate any of the rules in Section 5. None of the rules as they were laid out. And because I was so confident in my position that when I let the board run its course here and find your decision, I filed the appeal myself, and it was a relatively simple appeal for me. However, it was my right under the rules of this board to have an attorney. To have an attorney all through the circus, that was my hearing, and to have an attorney file the appeal. And upon that appeal being successful, the town's on the hook for that money. So I think it was a really bad decision, and I don't necessarily blame the attorney, because I think the attorney was not charged with reviewing whether or not there was a case. It's my belief, and I state very clearly, it's my belief, that the attorney was directed to find a way for us to do this, rather than, is this something that we should be doing? I have in support of that an article written by a group known as cityethics.org. And this is a national group that's gone into many towns, including Washington, D.C. and Jacksonville, Florida, and helped them establish their ethics codes. And how they came about it, I don't know, but they became privy to the articles written in the news transcript, the local newspaper. And after they did some research, they wrote an article. It was very helpful to me in my appeal. And it was very plain to me that, as I felt all along, the board erred in moving forward. And they offer some suggestions. They suggest that the complaint form that this board offers up to people that want to come here and bring a violation is very clear that a violation of Section 5 has to occur. Additionally, they wrote, and again, understand, Mr. Attorney, that I do appreciate your efforts here, but it says, finally, if the article was correct in describing what the Ethics Board's attorney said, the Ethics Board should be allowed to retain counsel with more understanding of government ethics, or require that its counsel be sufficiently trained. Having already told you that I appreciate what you do, it's difficult for me to bring that up and kind of slap you with that. But I really believe that this board potentially can be the most important board in town. But if you stray from your mission, it can't be. It absolutely cannot be. Section 5, that's it. There has to be a violation. It's as clear-cut as you can get. In December, the Finance Board, which oversees the appeal, wrote a letter to this board and said, not once, not twice, but 3 times, give legal analysis in support of a violation of Section 5. And yet, instead, this board submitted to that board the failed research saying that you could go beyond Section 5. Now, I understand that on viewing the email that I sent, it was atrocious. And I can understand your distaste for it. But your charge here is to review complaints based on Section 5. And not to interject your own feelings into things as strongly as you might feel about it. You do a disservice to your board. Rabbi Weber, I have reviewed over and over again the transcripts. And I really believe that you might have been the most thoughtful member. I believe that you were genuinely taken back by the language in my email. But I think you were trying to look at this situation the way it was supposed to be looked at. Because you were the one member of this board that repeatedly showed an interest in finding out if, in fact, my email had actually targeted the operators of that site. And as I kept saying to you, gentlemen, please put this in perspective. At this time, I'll just let you know that one of the principal people, one of the principal players in all of this, one of the principal complainants, one of the loudest voices against me, was none other than Michael Fishman. Michael Fishman has been arrested and charged with theft or deception in relation to defrauding a bank. And if the Asbury Park Press is to be believed in their facts, he was perpetrating this fraud at the exact time that he sat here and questioned my ethics, at the very same time that he was before this board. And Rabbi Weber, I also appreciate the fact that you tried to inject a little fatherly advice to me. And I don't know which one of your children that this was directed to by you originally. It might have been the son that I coached in football. But you talked about not posting things on the internet. Well, I'll caution you, sir, that when you have someone here that's taking a transcript and you're in a proceedings, that those words are also permanently etched. And I want to read something that you said. And again, I appreciated your thoughtfulness through all of this. But you said in the closing remarks of my first hearing here, and so if you want to walk out and say they don't want to hear from us, I will hope that you understand that many of us are clueless about local politics, and at least some of us take that as a point of tremendous pride. So we are going to conduct this hearing as we feel most appropriate, to be an ethics board and not to be a circus. And I appreciate that. But I got to tell you, I was a little bit taken back just a couple months later when in the news transcript I read a letter. Congressman Holt represents his constituents well. Very political letter, and is written October 20th, just before a general election where Congressman Rush Holt was running. And that letter was signed off by Rabbi Weber. And you know, at first I was a little bit outraged at the conflict in those statements. But I started thinking about it. And I see that the rabbi is involved with children and taking them to Washington, and he's had very positive experiences with Representative Holt. And at the time, Representative Holt was under a lot of fire. Now, I got to tell you first, I've dealt with Congressman Holt quite a bit and his staff. I helped to bring $1.2 million in funding for a road project in town through his office. By email, Congressman Holt is directly to his chief of staff. And he's a good guy, and the work he does with vets is tremendous, absolutely tremendous. I disagree greatly with some of his views on illegal immigration, but in general, he's a good guy. He was under tremendous fire publicly at this time. And I got to thinking, well, you know what? Rabbi Weber seemed all he did was speak up for someone that he cares about and respects, and thought that was being disrespected publicly. Well, you know what? That's exactly what I did. Now, I use very harsh language, absolutely. But I'm pretty good with words, and I could have made just as hurtful of remarks without that language, but that language served its purpose. A real smack in the face to the people that I thought were doing a tremendous disservice to my friends and people that I respect, just like Rabbi Weber respects Congressman Holt. So that's another observation that I made. Dr. Cali.
Are we going through each board member? Just one, are we going
No,
through each board
we're
member?
wrapping up. We're wrapping up because
Okay.
there's only a little bit more to go. I'm almost done. I'm almost done. Dr. Cali, I got to tell you, it appeared to me, I could be wrong, but it appeared to me that you had an agenda from the very beginning here. You wanted me found guilty of something and you wanted me removed from the zoning board. And had I violated any rule, you would have been just in that. I took an oath that I took very seriously. I followed the laws. I vowed to uphold the Constitution of the government and the state when I took my oath of office on the zoning board. And I was well aware of the ethics rules. And I didn't violate anything. I clearly didn't violate anything. You might not have liked my language. It might have been justified, but that wasn't your position as chairman to take that issue on. Who the council and the mayor appoint, that's their decision. This board's very important purpose in town is to review violations of the codified statutes. And I don't believe you did that. And I want to tell you what it's resulted in, an absolute cloud over this board. Because, gentlemen, I'm here to tell you, you got sucked in to petty political politics, just as I told you during my trial. And what you did was you cost this town a very dedicated zoning board member, because there was not on that board another member that put the time and effort into applications. And I can tell you that I've had attorneys and engineers that represent people before these boards that told me that word had gone out in those communities, the engineering and legal communities, that there was somebody paying attention on that board and you needed to cross your T's and dot your I's. These were things that were told to me. Perhaps they weren't true. And I'll tell you what else you did, and this is very personal to me. I have an 85-year-old mother that is not in very good health at all, and she hasn't been. And yet for the last 25 years, she has regularly gone to Jersey Shore and volunteered as an advocate, as a 30-year cancer survivor, as a 35-year cancer survivor, and as a 45-year cancer survivor. And she witnessed the people in that hospital, and she was well known in that hospital. And unfortunately, that woman has had to live with the same cloud that has hung over me for these past 18 months because of this nonsense, because of something that should have been a dead issue before it started, was promoted and allowed to go on and on and on because of this board's decision to take a case they had no business taking. Now, what I would suggest, Mr. Attorney, is that you maybe take a step back and look at your abilities in government ethics. And if you choose to stay, maybe you can reach out to cityethics.org, a national organization that will come in and help you make your process better. And Rabbi Weber, I think you're a good guy. But I would like you in the future to be a little bit less lofty and a little bit more humble when you evaluate people in front of this board. Because again, sir, I can understand why you wrote a letter supporting Rush Holt, but it is quite a conflict from the statement that you made, the very bold and direct statement you made about how you were above politics.
I didn't say that.
And Dr. Weber, Dr. Cali rather, I think that you have done this board such a tremendous disservice that the best way to try to rebuild this board's credibility would be to step down. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Did you submit this for our review? Is this something you want us to look at?
That's something I submitted quite some time ago. Yes, that's something you should look at. Absolutely. Cityethics.org. And I think that's an organization that can come and make this better. As I stated, I believe that this board has the potential to be one of the most important boards in this town. Absolutely. But it has to be run right, and it hasn't been.
Thank you. Public voice is still open. Yes. Introduce yourself, please.
My name is Josh Pollack. I live on Stevenson Drive here in Marlboro. I'd like to add one quick thing to my statement to the gentleman to Mr. Callie's right. I do not know you, and you were not a part of these hearings, I don't believe, so I'm sorry you'll have to listen to this.
But just so everyone knows who I am, because I don't know who any of you are. My name's Howard Wolfson, and I was appointed to the Ethics Board in February. I'm a 22-year resident of the town. I'm not involved in politics. I'm an independent. I'm a public servant. I enjoy public service. I'm also a commissioner on the Township Parks and Recreation Commission, and I also happen to be an attorney. And I had seen your city ethics article a couple months ago because I'm also very independent, and so although I don't know anything about the dispute, one of the first things I did when I got appointed is I was read up on everything I could find.
I appreciate that.
Pleasure to meet you and welcome to the board.
Thank you.
And I believe you were introduced as Liza last time. I don't recall your last name.
Consley.
Okay, I'm sorry. You'll have to listen to this too. You sat pretty silent until you're part of the unanimous guilty vote. Although I sit on Marlboro's Township's Planning Board, my appearance here tonight has nothing whatsoever to do with my volunteer service to the Township of Marlboro. Rather, I appear in accordance with my First Amendment rights to voice my opinions in a peaceful, law-abiding fashion, as I am still a citizen of Marlboro. What I say here is encapsulated and is specific only to this case, which was before the Ethics Board. My commentary in no way should be stretched out of context, quote shortened, or taken out of context for persuasive purposes of misrepresenting what I've said, or to be used in an attempt to apply these forthcoming comments for any purpose other than speaking my mind tonight in this room, in front of this board, and the audience here tonight. My comments apply only to the recorded testimony which I found in the transcripts of the hearings and what I heard with my own ears and saw with my own eyes in this room relating to Knight et al. Versus Shaflin. They do not apply to any other situation, real, hypothetical, or anything else I may not have mentioned here. Mr. Shaflin's email, by his own admission, was inappropriate. The email contained language that was offensive and has no place in society Yet somehow it wasn't unethical. This board, however, has taken an otherwise private email, publicly disseminated solely by members of the Republicans of Marlboro, and allowed itself to be sucked into petty partisan politics during its 1692-style Salem witch hunt for Paul Shaflin. Mr. Calley, you have all the answers. Do you remember the acrimonious way you spewed that at me during my testimony? In case you don't, or would attempt to deny it, on page 108 of the transcript from the May 26, 2010 session of this matter's hearing, as you were interrupting my testimony, which may have led to actual facts, though you weren't interested at the time, and I assume you still aren't, I answered back to you according to the record. I do have this one, though. I don't have all the answers. What I can tell you factually is who did not have all, or actually any answers. The team of Knight, the local GOP president, Fishman, the alleged felon, Wolfson, and Zatz, vice president of the local GOP, and a disgruntled, failed Republican council candidate. I was going to respectfully ask Mr. Zatz for forgiveness in the grouping. However, his disrespect for this board by not showing today, and his letter in the transcript, we see that he has jumped up on the soapbox with the rest of them. During the campaign, Mr. Zatz published a letter in the news transcript essentially saying, "My parents survived the Holocaust, so vote me in." This offended many people, Jews especially. Had many blog discussions about how could a child of a survivor refer to the worst period of Jewish history for political gain. Now Mr. Zatz, on the day of this meeting no less, decides to play the race and sexual orientation combo with the letter to the news transcript. If he were here, I would tell him it was an excellent play. However, it is an ineffective, inaccurate, and transparent baby wipe to deal with the eggs splattered on all of your faces after the state's decision to reverse this ethics board's ruling. The reprieve for the baby, and I put that in quotes as it's a Salem witch trial term, that Mr. Zatz's loophole commentary refers to is the concrete word of the state of New Jersey saying this ethics board had no jurisdiction over the matter whatsoever, but GOP politics prevailed here. Other than Zatz, who testified that he knew where he got the infamous email from, no one else knew where it came from. This enlightenment came to us as an interruption of Mr. Knight's testimony from Mr. Zatz, contradicting Mr. Knight's assertion that he didn't forward the email to anyone. It also came to light on page 49 of the same transcript that Mr. Tomaselli, also a local GOP member, was the first person to, quote, expose this email to the public by reading portions of it to the Marlboro Zoning Board. At the very next town council meeting, Mr. Knight read portions of it into the record during Citizens' Voice, where he announced he was going to the ethics board to file a complaint against Mr. Shaflin. The rest piled on. I guess a gang mentality thing. I don't really understand it. A fact that was pointed out numerous times, Mr. Calley, is these were all members of the Republican Club, and many had a tie to the zoning board. Fishman is former chairman overnight and former vice chairman. But there was one key person in the center of it all, wasn't there? You, Mr. Calley, and your board chose to ignore facts. I don't find it to be coincidence that you, Mr. Calley, and Mr. Fishman received your appointments to your respective boards from the previous Republican administration. Fishman, who on page 72 of your transcript says, quote, "I think we should just strive to bring the top 10% of our, intelligent, ethical people and put them on the boards." Did he make this statement immediately after filling out his fraudulent mortgage application? Anyway, I find it amusing when your fellow GOPer, a fellow political appointee, an accused felon, a man who was arrested according to the Asbury Park Press for the charge of theft by deception, who is today free on bail, awaiting trial for his alleged crime, makes a statement like that, and you agree with it. Yet during Mr. Fishman's testimony, again, which was in the same general time frame as his alleged crime, you and another board member, along with this now alleged felon, would refer to each other by first name only. It was to a point that this other board member felt it necessary to put on the record, on page 37, that he and Mr. Calley have a prior relationship with Mr. Fishman. I will point out that this board member did this only after members of the audience, myself included, commented quite loudly how inappropriate it was for the chairman of an ethics board and at least one other member to be referring to a complainant by colloquial first name during testimony. Then again, within a few minutes' time, this very same board member on page 45 says, "You have to speak, Mike." It makes one wonder, doesn't it? What may have been seen as a faux pas has the potential to become a Freudian slip admission as to why this board took jurisdiction over the matter in the first place. Although Rabbi Weber attempted to rein things in a little when on page 33, he said, "Please don't turn this into a political issue because we won't accept." This perfunctory hearing was just that, political. By the way, Rabbi, you carried your non-political involvement and non-political affiliation almost like a badge of honor, yet in the last congressional campaign you published a letter of support for one of the candidates in a local paper, clearly taking a political position. Lashon hara, Rabbi, or would it be motzi shem ra in this case?
Okay.
Rabbi, isn't it just as bad to watch, for one, to watch these sins happen as to participate in them? Maybe a refresher read of Chafetz Chaim by Rabbi Israel Meir Kagan, which lists 31 speech-related mitzvot in the Torah. You may be wise to brush up on the other 582 from the Taryag mitzvot. I'm sure your congregation would appreciate that. The only people who had access to this email were allegedly the owners of the website, which allegedly no one knew anything about according to the testimony, yet Knight, Fishman, Wolfson, Zatz, and Tomaselli, who are all current or previous members of the now disgraced Marlboro Republican Club, somehow got this email, read it, and spread its contents with reckless abandon for how disgusting they claimed it to be. Remember, none of them had anything to do with the website, and none of them knew how they came to be in possession of it, but they printed it out, brought it to an ethics board with a Republican chairperson, and though there was no reason legally to take jurisdiction, you did, and you proceeded with doing the devil's bidding during this witch hunt. Surprising you didn't have the stake flaming and ready just outside Town Hall, just like in Salem. Sorry if you don't like it, it happens to be true.
You're very creative in your writing, it's really appreciated.
Well, you did ask if I was an attorney in a nasty way during testimony,
Can I ask
so
the same question I asked before, is how much longer is this going to go on?
I have three double space 24-point font pages, so probably another 90 seconds. I think what bothered you most, Mr. Calley, is that the witnesses Mr. Shaflin called were always clear and concise. The testimony given was lucid and factual regardless of the person's political affiliation. More importantly, Mr. Calley, the testimony was leading you in a direction away from that clearly displayed, predictable, predetermined, politically motivated decision that the state of New Jersey overwhelmingly rejected and overturned. With Thomas Neff, the chairman of the local finance board, cautioning, quote, "Local government officers are encouraged to use the utmost discretion in articulating their personal opinions of people in a public forum." Your behavior and commentary during the hearings and on the record is nothing short of vile. You and your behavior and that of this board clearly show signs of itself being unethical. Some of the behaviors exhibited by you and or the rest of your board may even have been more. I call for an investigation into your behavior and actions and that of the rest of the board, current and former members, from the highest levels of our state government. On page 127 of the transcript of the May 26 meeting, while you were busy predetermining what was relevant and what wasn't in Ms. Rosenwald's testimony, I asked, "Wouldn't you want all the information you can gather?" And your response, sir, was a scowl and a headshake in the negative, so you wouldn't be recorded giving an answer to what I'm sure you just considered an out-of-turn question from the audience. You were determined to keep as much fact out of this hearing as possible, since the facts weren't something you were interested in. I quote again, I had tempted to contact Mr., and I added in parentheses for clarification, Al Rosenthal, prior to the subpoena being served. That, by the way, is a quote from you on page 14, as it was trying to be ascertained by Mr. Shaflin why Mr. Rosenthal didn't appear as he was expecting. Clearly, he was warned of the impending service, he was able to evade said service, and didn't have to appear before your board. You're both Republicans. Coincidental again, I guess. Next, on pages 33 and 34 of the testimony, you allow Mr. Fishman, the free on bail awaiting trial accused felon, fumble around with a list of, quote, domain names that he allegedly owns. You accepted into evidence this list of names, knowing by Fishman's own admission the web company wouldn't provide him any information. Sherry brings in and swears to the authenticity of his uncorroborated and unsubstantiated documents which he presented as evidence, which you accepted. Mr. Homelsky, where were you for this? Shown by your comments on page 34, we're trying to read and listen at the same time. Why were you reading anything? What was provided to you was nothing more than the counterfeiter swearing on paper he printed to the item's authenticity. When actual evidence that might meet a legal standard was offered by the complainants, i.e. the email address on the copy submitted to the board was altered. It was in a slightly different font and slightly offline with the rest. At the top of page 58, Mr. Shaflin points out a discrepancy in the two copies of the email that allegedly just showed up in everybody's inboxes. Fishman said okay when asked about it. Mr. Homelsky simply asked if Mr. Shaflin wanted to give it to Fishman so he could see, and no one seemed to care that the bottom line is one copy of this email was surprisingly manufactured. And still, none of you probed into the origin of the email. The closest we came to digging deeper about the origin of the email was on page 58 when Mr. Salmon commented when another attempt to enter closed session and make a decision was avoided. Quote, I think Mr. Fishman was in the middle of giving an answer. I think we should hear that. However, Mr. Fishman went on with more blinding about how his wife and kids were attacked, blah, blah, blah. When this was brought to your attention, you summarily dismissed it as not important. You didn't ask a single question about it. You didn't even look at the documents in question. This is simply status quo for this hearing, this board. Accepting into evidence items that have been clearly tampered with, not making a report of any kind, which in my mind seems like burying the biggest piece of the puzzle that seems to be the glue in this political revenge fiasco. I know that you must have been shocked when it was discovered, as you are conspicuously silent on this matter. Mr. Homelsky, although you are a volunteer, and like Paul, we appreciate your service to this town, it's embarrassing as attorney for the board that you didn't assist upon this minor discrepancy being cleared up before keeping the two documents in evidence, seeing as they were submitted by the group. I'm sorry, I lost my place. Seeing they were submitted by the group as true copies of the same document. Yet again, one was surprisingly manufactured. Not one member of this board was remotely concerned with how the email, quote, showed up to anyone. And all of you refused to connect the dots. For Pete's sake, people, they were numbered for you. I must applaud you, Mr. Calley, for sticking to the alleged plan, no matter what the actual evidence and facts showed. With all of this laid out in writing, and on the record forevermore, you should realize that your future absence from this board should be fait accompli. Now is the time for you to own up to what has gone on here. I demand you resign due to your ethical issues, misconduct, and dereliction of duties. Now, Mr. Calley, go ahead and laugh. It's fine.
Cough, I have allergies.
Don't lie. It's not becoming of you. Now, Mr. Calley, this town has another white elephant. Why don't you and the others just fade off into oblivion? Oh, wait, one final point, Mr. Calley. You and your board were so eager to return a guilty verdict, you entered it failing to, quote, articulate a legal analysis supporting a violation of a specific provision that Mr. Shaflin supposedly violated in the Ethics Code. I remember why now. That's right. There isn't one. Now you have brought Mr. Cali even more attention for corruption and shame to a community that is striving to escape the cloud of corruption from previous decades. Thank you for your time.
Anyone else for public voice?
I'd like to say something. I don't think it's going to be as long.
Just introduce yourself, yeah. Just
I will introduce myself.
Thank you.
My name is Ira Levin. I live at 1 Jackson Way in Marlboro. I'm going to sit up here. Excuse me, I'm sorry. I just have a couple things to say. I'm a little disappointed that a member of the Ethics Board, I'm speaking about you, Mr. Cali, would sit up there, regardless of what anyone says, and kind of smirk and be, you know, think it's funny. I think these are pretty serious proceedings. I think that a guy like Paul, regardless of what he did, in this country, and although this is not a court of law, should be assumed, there's an assumption of innocence until proven guilty. And I think it was pretty apparent, although at the time there was a lot of passionate people in the room and emotions were running high. I think at the time there was a certain fervor that some of the members of this board had with regards to what Mr. Shaflin did, admitted to doing, which was sending an email to a website that said, hey, you send us your emails, we'll keep it confidential. It's between you and us. There's a certain level of assumption one can make that that's going to remain private. Now, there are a lot of people who have said a lot of things about Mr. Fishman or the credibility of those people. I don't think I need to get into that as much as I'd just like to say that events prior to that email being sent affected a number of us in the room. There were slanderous, libel things that were said and posted on the internet. Mr. Shaflin forwarded that email to me before he submitted it, and I read it and I thought it was pretty funny, because the effect he was trying to get was for the person who owned the website to come forward and do something stupid, which is exactly what happened. And you can say what you want about they're all Republicans. I don't believe in conspiracy theories so much, but it's pretty convenient that all of these guys, especially Michael Fishman, who immediately after John Hornick was elected was walking around saying, you're going to be on planning and you're going to be on zoning and I'm going to get you this and that, until John said, well, wait a second, those are mayoral appointments and town council appointments, you can't dole out those jobs. And he got all pissed off with him and he didn't want any part of it. And while this might not mean anything to you specifically because it's not related to the case, when we were here originally and we said, and we were telling you these things, and you said you didn't need to hear everything, when Josh said, aren't you interested in all the facts? I don't think we need to hear that. The background to what led up to those events is pretty pertinent, because Mike Fishman is a guy who does things because he thinks he can. And I would say, although it's not a great picture, that pretty much exemplifies the key witness and the key complainant being led into the police station in handcuffs.
His back is
Yeah, it's his back. I know, but
you're identifying this as someone?
Yeah, I was there. I watched it.
We were there live.
I actually videotaped it. If you want the videotape.
It is Michael Fishman who was crying that we were there.
I never met in my life before.
I totally get it, and I know Rabbi.
One point, could I ask just one
I don't
question?
know. Absolutely.
I'm trying to understand how this fits in with your saying that people are innocent until proven guilty.
Absolutely. He was
No,
alleged, right? And the guy gets arrested. Now he's arrested.
No, I understand that. That's not innocent.
Listen, Rabbi, he was arrested, right? He was arrested. So what am I supposed to do now? I'm supposed to go, I should file some kind of ethics charge, prevent that guy from ever being on any committee?
I'm trying to understand your statement when you said that we should...
But you're quick to defend him and quick to prosecute this guy.
No, I'm asking a question.
My point is that when you talk about credibility and what's going on, this is a guy who, one of the other complainants, Steve Wolfson, filed a report against him because he stole something from his office allegedly.
And would you have liked us to consider that in the ethics investigation?
No, because that hadn't happened.
Ethics
Hold on a second.
investigation.
That hadn't happened yet. The thing that bothers me is that this guy who sent this email to elicit a response to something, there's a presumption of privacy, okay? You know, if a student in high school puts drugs in their locker, they might think that their locker's not subsequent or subject to inspection, which is not true. The Supreme Court says there's no presumption of privacy there because it's public property, it's a school-owned locker. And it's kind of the same thing. When someone puts on the internet a specific statement that says, if you submit something to us, it will stay confidential.
Sir, I'm just trying to understand the purpose of your statements now, which you said we're going to be brief.
I'm sorry, you're right. You know what, because I'm starting to get a little agitated because this guy tried to destroy my marriage and my personal life, along with some friends of mine.
This guy, which guy?
Mike Fishman.
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought you were...
Yeah, no, absolutely not. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I'm sorry.
Just trying to understand.
But my point is that, you know, if you're going to pass judgment on someone, you should take the time to get all of the information. Not listen to what you want to hear. You sit in a position of responsibility that affects people's lives. The guy busts, I'm on the zoning board. I do not represent the zoning board tonight. The guy busts his ass for the benefit of this township. For you guys, for the residents, for every applicant that appears before that zoning board. He goes to every site. He reads every piece of information related to every application. He busts his ass. He tried to do something in my defense, and my friend's defense, to something that was supposed to be, was advertised as private. All of these guys come out of the woodwork all of a sudden, from the other side of the aisle, and nobody stops to think the email that they submit, they don't match. No one stops to think that that could possibly be an issue. I mean, I don't understand how you make a determination. He's innocent. He hasn't been tried, you know. But the responsibility of the prosecutor is going to be to present evidence to the court to seek a conviction.
Actual
evidence. Hold on a second. Evidence that was submitted with regards to this. I mean, in addition to you not even having the ability. I mean, the city ethics writes a report and says you guys should have an attorney that is familiar with municipal law. I mean, everybody who's read this case and has commented on it has said that this was completely wrong. And I think the least you could do is issue a statement apologizing to the guy. And you know, you don't want to resign? Don't resign. I don't care. It's embarrassing. This town has gone through so much slop from dirtbags like that, and he's a dirtbag not for what he's allegedly done, but from other things that I've been personally involved with him. We've gone through Scanapico and Spalero and all the bad things.
This is not helping us right now.
Well, you know what would help us? You should apologize. A written apology.
Thank you.
A written apology.
Thank you.
They won't do it because they're not interested.
You're not on the board, so you know, as much as I appreciate your input, you should issue a written apology. And Mr. Calley, I'm sorry, just the smug look on your face. It's
I've been
so
accused of things that are totally erroneous. I listened for 20 straight
Let's
minutes
say
to
not
it.
tonight. Hold on.
Fine.
40
I don't know Mr. Fishman. I was appointed by Mayor Hornick and approved by the Democratic Council.
Which is the same process.
Errors in your things. I sat and listened to all of them. I'm a human being. I'm a volunteer too.
That's the same process that all of us have gone through.
I don't have to agree with
He's a volunteer, I'm a volunteer, he's a volunteer, you're a volunteer. All of us.
Have you had your religious principles questioned at any point?
How dare you question me with a question, Rabbi?
I can tell you this.
At that.
As you know.
I'm sorry. I know the man for 70 years.
If we're all together, if we're all in this together, have you had your religious principles questioned?
No. I will say this. As you know, I'm Jewish, right? This guy's accused of being Ira Levin.
Reverend Shapiro is a friend of mine. What do you want?
Yeah, all right. But, you know, he's accused of being an anti-Semite, a homophobe, whatever. Now, I know what Josh said with I get that. And I'm sorry.
So you get what?
That you feel offended that your religious principles have been questioned by somebody.
I'm not offended. I'm just, when you said that we've all been through this.
No, I'm sorry.
That's happened to you too.
What we've all been through is being selected by Mayor Hornick or the council, volunteering, and being vetted by that group of people and being put on a committee.
I've been appointed by 2 different administrations.
Okay.
Not everyone can say that.
Excellent.
Now, okay.
Michael Messinger's been appointed. He's been appointed. I've been appointed. We've all been appointed. We're in the same club.
No, she was elected.
Oh, she was elected. She was elected. We're all in the same group. It's going to go on for as long as the public wants it to go on.
Yeah,
You know,
we listened to
and-
you guys for 3
Right,
full
I mean,
meetings.
we came here to those meetings for those 3 nights or 4 nights, and we listened to you guys. The least you could do is listen to us. We're, you know, unfortunately, we're the only concerned citizens in the frickin' town. And, you know, it's like Temple on a Friday night, there's 8 people, you know, it's the same thing.
Again, I'm going to ask
You know.
you not to do things.
No, I'm not that bad. I'm saying. But, you know, my point is that your behavior at some point was unprofessional. It was. The smirking, the grimacing, the snickering, not cool. I mean, you represent the town just like I do when I'm on that zoning board. I don't laugh at applicants when they want to build a big house with an elevator in it, 3 times the size of the guy next door, who's sitting in the audience complaining that he doesn't want some monstrosity built next door to him. I treat those applications very seriously. Anything before this board should be treated very seriously. There should be no room for laughing, there should be no room for rolling your eyes, or questioning how long stuff goes on. And I gotta tell you, frankly, you know, I'm on a first-name basis with the mayor too. You know, just like Mike Fisher was on a first-name basis with Bob Salmon. And I like to think I could walk into John's office and ask for favors, but I don't. Because I don't abuse the relationship. And I think that being put in that position, being on this board, is a certain responsibility that you owe to him, to the council, and to the people in this town, and I think you violated that. And you can, you can shake your head, you can roll your eyes, you can do and say what you want. It was wrong. You shouldn't have taken jurisdiction of the thing, you shouldn't have entertained poor evidence, it shouldn't have been admissible. There are a million things you can talk about. I've spoken way longer than I anticipated speaking, and I apologize. But I think your behavior specifically was out of line. And I think you owe him a written apology, and it should be in the transcript in the Asbury Park Press. I'm sorry, I'm done.
Thank you. Anyone else want to speak in public voice?
I don't know whether you want me to speak in public voice or not. My name's Lou Raynaud, and I'm the Director of Law and Township Attorney for the Township of Marlboro. And
private session, because
that would, I'm not sure that, what about a closed session matter, but I just wanted you to know that I was here, and I had been on, I think in your agenda for the last few meetings that did not happen, so I...
Thank you for coming. Yes, we'll call upon you. Okay, let's have a motion to close public voice.
Motion to close public voice.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor? Thank you. Public voice portion of the agenda is closed. Thank you. We're moving on to reports of chairperson and members of the board. I did receive a letter from the state of New Jersey concerning the Paul Schlaflin matter. If you haven't received it, I have a copy for you.
Take one now.
Same one, yeah. I have the original if you'd like to see it.
I got it. Yeah.
Okay. So that'll be for just distributing that now because I received it, and we'll move that. We'll discuss that during number 6. Other than that, went to the post office today and we settled the issue, and we have some new keys for the post office box. We have 2 keys. I'll maintain one, and I'll give you one. And Mr. Hamelska has volunteered to also check the mailbox on a frequent basis if we decide we need that. All right?
Same number?
Same number, 372. Just wanted to say during my portion of the meeting here that I appreciate the public voices, public comments that were made. I don't agree with many of the things that were said. I felt that there were some very erroneous comments made, some disparaging comments as well. And personally, I think that the board did a great job in handling this matter, which was put before us. We gave it an ample amount of time, I felt. We believe we had 3 nights of hearings. We are all volunteers, and I could speak for those members that shared this table with me. Those members that shared the deliberations at this table with me, I felt were earnest. I felt were diligent. I thought also we all gave our best effort. Unfortunately, we can't please both sides, and I think that we would, we'll learn from this, we'll move on. We're working on the code. We'll continue our workshop to continue the evolving nature of our ethics code. It will change going forward, and we'll take it from there. But I thank all the members of this board who gave their time and their efforts to handling this matter. Okay. Yes.
This report of members of the board, is that what we're doing?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I have a fairly thick skin. You've got to do what I do. I've been told I've been wrong on a number of things, and very often the people were correct in saying it. Many of you may not be aware of the contents of the phrase Lashon Hara, or Motzi Shem Ra. It's second only to murder in Judaism as a crime. Lashon Hara means an evil tongue. And I am smarting and deeply hurt and unable to find the way to respond to people accusing me of violating the very basis of my life. Not my work on an ethics board.
That's not what I said.
And I need that in here also because I don't remember doing anything that deserves that. Whether I was right or wrong on an issue of ethics or politics or whatever, I do not believe I deserve to be accused of violating the second most heinous crime in Judaism.
Rabbi, if I may, I did not accuse you of that.
I heard you very well, sir.
I will read it again if you'd like.
Public voice is closed, please maintain your comments.
Well, I clearly misunderstood
Contain your comments, please. You had...
Again, you don't care about facts or...
I didn't say anything when you did it.
I said, isn't it as bad for one to watch these sins happen as to commit them? You did not commit Lashon Hara, but that is what has happened in this room, Rabbi. That was my point, and I'm sorry you misunderstood.
That question, posting now the letter from...
We're going to move on. That's a separate section if you want to discuss that.
That's what I wanted to say.
Anything else? Mr. Melsky, anything to add in the report?
Nope.
Okay, so let's move on. Thank you. Next, we're going to be reviewing the number 6 on the agenda, reviewing the decision from the DCA in regard to Mr. Paul Shaflin's appeal, which you all have the letter in front of you, and you've all read it. I've read it. So we'll open the board to any discussion on how you think we should proceed to respond to this letter. Let's get some ideas on the table here.
If I may.
Yes.
Andy, you had given us a decision based on what you had researched in law that said that this was possible. Where does this fit with this now? Does it mean they just rejected that argument?
Correct.
Okay. So is it something you see as arguable further or no?
Could have, I have to look into it, but I mean, I think you could appeal this to you could appeal this to the Superior Court or Administrative Law Court if you wanted to appeal it to a next stage higher, indicating that the State of New Jersey Department of Community Affairs made a mistake and appeal it further, saying that, that the finding section of the Code of Ethics is in fact part of the Code of Ethics, which, other courts have found that's true.
Have any found that it's not true? I mean, have there been any decision on the other side?
There was no decision there was no direct case saying that, clearly stating that the finding section of the Code of Ethics, which is inside a New Jersey state statute, is in fact not something you can, to use a term, hang your hat on. It was just, quite frankly, the opposite in the spirit of the Code of Ethics. So, that's something that the board can consider, and I can provide options as to what would be the next steps for an appeal, if the board decides to do that.
I wasn't involved, so I'm somewhat of an outsider, so to speak, but I am a board member today, and so as this issue comes before us, I think it's my responsibility to address it, and in my view, I don't think that we should consider an appeal. I think that we've received a very clear direction that, leaving aside what anyone may think of the letters and all the other background that occurred, that it doesn't violate any specific provision in the ethics code. And it seems to me that that ends the matter. It may not end the matter of does the ethics code need to be looked at with the future in mind, and how changes might be made that might address, without opening a Pandora's box, conduct like this. And I'll leave aside my personal view on whether that's good or bad. But it seems to me that this matter's at an end, and we shouldn't consider an appeal, and we should be guided by the decision we've received telling us that there's been no violation of any specific provision in the ethics code, therefore nothing for us to proceed on.
My question is, the sentence of local government officers are encouraged to use the utmost discretion in articulating their personal opinion of people in public forum. Who are they directed?
I don't think that was directed to this board.
I don't think that was directed
to
The letter was written to Mr. Shaflin.
Yeah, the letter's not written to us, though.
Because it was mentioned here that
Yes,
this sentence
that was also mentioned
at
another erroneous portion of the
obviously is not directed at the members of the board.
Yes. Yeah, so that wasn't intended to be, it was misread, apparently. That interests me that the letter was not sent to us. I mean, we took the time and effort to send a literal binder. I don't know how many pages we had, but a few hundred pages of documents and case law and things that we prepared on this matter to the DCA, and we didn't receive any reply directly to our board. We're reading a carbon CC to Mr. Shaflin, and not to us directly. So, but I think what concerns me at this point is that we don't have any further jurisdiction. Mr. Shaflin has resigned from the board prior to the board's decision, and at this point there would be no further reason to proceed, I feel.
Yeah, I listened to some of the statements made in the public forum, and though I'm not an attorney, but I don't see that if a higher court overturns a lower court, that's a reason for members of the lower court to resign. Maybe the attorneys can correct me if...
That's correct.
So it's not really something shameful anyway that your decision is being overturned.
Nobody likes to get overturned. When I got out of law school, I was a clerk for a federal judge, and he was overturned twice in 2 years. And he for the next 20 years, he would jab me about it because it was the only times he was ever reversed, and he found it a little bit embarrassing. And judges get reversed all the time. Some of the best judges are constantly reversed because sometimes they're also judges who are on the cutting edge of the law. So no, getting reversed is not the basis to resign or stop being a public volunteer, which is, I think, the one thing everyone in this room agrees on is how important it is for everyone to volunteer in this town. If we didn't have public volunteers, I mean, who would run all of these different commissions and boards and other important things that we do? And I have no idea, since I wasn't involved, about any of the things that were said in public voice. I'm sure there's good points, bad points, and indifferent points, and everyone's had their say, and I think that's a good thing. Everyone's got it off their chest, and I think we should move forward.
I'm just totally perplexed by this whole thing. But I follow what Howard is saying. I absolutely agree. I think it was the comments that Mr. Shaflin sent were just so offensive to me that I just cannot understand how, even though it may not fall into 5, and that's absolutely correct. There is no clear indication this is 5. But I just find that it just makes it's impossible. I mean, clearly it is possible, but it would seem to me just difficult to comprehend how such comments sent over the internet, which I find to be public, not private, somehow trumps the decision that we made, but I absolutely agree with that we have to move on.
I 100% agree also. Mr. Pollock said I was silent during the hearings, however, I was not appointed until the last day of hearing, so.
That's what I said the last
Let's get
day
that
was
straight.
here.
I was only here for the last session and read everything very diligently before that session, so I was very well informed. Having all that knowledge, agree that this needs to be moved on.
I just want to affirm our confidence in our chairman, and I think he did a very good job presiding over the hearing, and we will definitely appreciate it.
Thank you. I believe, if I think back to the decision that we made, I believe it was 6-0, and the board felt unanimously that in its decision that there was a violation of the ethics code. Now that we've been informed by the state of New Jersey Department of Community Affairs, who twice prior watered down our ethics code when we were first formulating the ethics code about 6 or 7 years ago. Rabbi Weber and I both were on the board then, and we sent our ethics code. This was at the height of some of the political corruption in the town that was mentioned tonight, and we had a more strict code. We presented a more strict code because we all didn't want to live in a town that was full of corruption. And we were twice turned down, and we were told, no, you have to water down the code a bit. It's too difficult to enforce this type of thing. So we presented a more lenient code, and then it was approved. So I'm not saying I agree with what the state of New Jersey has been told us in this letter to Mr. Shaflin, but what I am saying is that our board felt very strongly, it was 6-0 the vote, there were no dissenting votes, that what we saw was behavior unbecoming a public or appointed or elected official. And because of that, I think that, since then we have been attending workshops here on the Ethics Board, looking for ways where we can incorporate some of that language describing that type of behavior and move it into an enforceable section of the ethics code. So like I mentioned earlier, in response to some of the public voice, we learn, we go forward. We don't have to like everything that's presented before us, but as long as we learn something from it, we can proceed and hopefully do an attempt to solve the same issues later on with some more experience behind us. And with that said, and also what I said earlier, that the board no longer has any jurisdiction over the person that our friend, Mr. Shaflin, our co-president. I think that we should no longer consider this matter and consider it closed. So with that said, I would entertain a motion so we can formalize the response to this letter.
I'd make a motion that upon the remand of the board's decision to us, that the Ethics Board unanimously agree that no further action is to be taken with respect to this complaint, and that the complaint will be deemed, against Mr. Shaflin, the complaint will be deemed dismissed.
I just take away unanimously because we haven't voted yet.
So modified.
What was, I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
That modified to take out the word unanimous.
Okay.
I second.
Discussion. My discussion would be, would we be dismissing the complaint? It's already resolved as far as this board is concerned. We wouldn't be dismissing that.
Not pursuing it further.
We will not appeal the complaint.
I believe that technically, as a result of the finding on appeal, that there is no code provision that addresses it. I believe the proper thing to do would be to dismiss the complaint.
It was remanded back, so it's up, because it's remanded, I think you have to, if you're not going to pursue it, you do need to dismiss it.
So maintain the original language of Mr. Wolf's motion.
Yep. Upon remand of the board decision that the ethics board hereby deem the complaint hereby deem the complaint against Mr. Shaflin deemed dismissed.
Any more discussion? All in favor? All opposed? Abstentions? One abstention. Okay, thank you.
May I ask a question of Mr. Hamelski as far as procedure?
Let's go on to, oh, sorry, you can hold that to after the meeting, please. We're going to move on to workshop. And I think what we're going to do, because of the hour already, to start a workshop at this point, I think we're going to move the item number 7 workshop on working on addendums to the ethics code. I'd like to make a motion that we move that to the next meeting as an individual workshop evening. Second.
Are we meeting in July or August?
Technically, we're meeting in July.
I'm available. I mean, we could meet.
July, what's the date?
Second Wednesday would be...
Outside.
13th.
Again.
I'll be here unless I'm on an aircraft carrier. They haven't told me when.
Oh, really?
Yeah. They're flying me out. I'm flying me back.
Really?
Yeah. Don't know when it's going to be, but I'm going.
Chaplain?
Yes.
Beautiful. So that'll be moved to the July 13th meeting. So I made a motion.
I'll second it.
Thank you. Any discussion about moving that? All in favor? Opposed?
I'm sorry, in favor.
In favor, thank you. Okay, that's it. That's unanimous.
We move into executive session now.
I'll second the motion. Okay. Any discussion? Motion on the floor is that we move into executive session to discuss personnel issues pertaining to the board. All in favor? Opposed? 6 in favor, 0 opposed. The Marlboro Township Ethics Board will now move into executive session, and we will return to public session upon completion of executive session.
Can you tell me what you're going into executive session for?
We're discussing a personnel issue concerning a member of the board.
Excuse me,
That's
but
not executive session. That's not on your exclusions as executive session.
member of the board is not
It's
an
public.
employee.
It must be done-
Folks,
It's not employee, you can't discuss that in executive session. That must be done publicly.
In addition, you're in violation of the Open Public Meetings Act, and not being as specific as possible, the attorney can review the Rutgers case if he chooses.
I'm going to defer, since public voice is closed and we should not be entertaining comments from the public at this point, I'd like to...
Okay, would you like me to file a complaint in Superior Court against
I'd like to ask Mr. Hamelski for some guidance on this and which way should the board proceed.
I mean, personnel issues generally, because it's discussion of a public, they're correct.
So that we can do it in
We
public?
should just do it in public, it's fine.
The reason I did it in executive session is I was advised by the board attorney to move into executive session. On the original agenda, it was not an executive session.
So we'll take it out.
Okay, so motion to remove, to go back into public session.
It doesn't matter, yeah.
Just rescind it.
Okay.
Rescind it.
Okay, rescind it. On the original agenda, it was not an executive session. Okay, so here we have before us the issue from a prior meeting concerning the potential conflict of a member of the Ethics Board serving on an additional board at the town simultaneously. And we have a guest this evening who would like to address the board. If you would introduce yourself again for the record, please.
I will. My name is...
Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me, and I know that like I said, I've made myself available, and I know that you are all busy, and I'm glad that you've had the opportunity to at least hear from me. My name is Lou Raynone. I am the Director of Law and the Township Attorney for the Township. And the mayor asked me to come because I know that there were some questions raised by the board And I had a dialogue with your attorney, Mr. Helmeski, about this, and I wanted to come and talk to you because I have two concerns, and I think the administration has two concerns. The first is, in my experience, and as somebody earlier tonight said something about...
Excuse me, we're doing this in public forum, so at least we should explain what this is about.
Sure, and I'll get to that, if I can. My experience in representing governing bodies goes back about 30 years, and I think that not to be conceited, I think that if you talk to most municipal attorneys in the state, they'll tell you that I'm probably one of the most experienced and municipal attorneys in the state. This is the first time I've ever had a board question an executive as to why an appointment was made. And I don't want to suggest that boards aren't inquisitive, but everybody has their authority. And in this case, all of the authority is established by New Jersey law. And clearly there's an authority for the appointment of members of the Ethics Board, like there's an authority for the appointment of zoning board members or planning board members, or frankly every other board that there is in town. It's either an authority established by a state statute or established by your municipal ordinance. So it's unusual for the executive to be called upon by a board to question why it is that there is an appointment. The second thing is that and the question here is, I guess, that Mr. Wolfson is a member of the Recreation Commission. And the question was, well, that's a conflict. Well, the statute says that your board is constituted of 6 people, no less than 2 of which shall be public members, and no more than 3 of which shall be a member of the same political party. Now, it's a pretty safe reading of the English, without being a lawyer, that if it says that no more than a certain number can be public or non-public, that obviously it contemplates that there will be municipal officials and public members of your board. So, frankly, the mayor could appoint the business administrator if he lived in town, a member of the council, and me to the ethics board if he wanted to, if we were residents of the town and had good moral character. I guess that's part of the standard. And that's his determination. So I don't really know what the question is with regards to a conflict, and I kind of explored this a little bit with your attorney, and in doing that it came to me that there was maybe a different problem. And the different problem is a perception as to what the board believes its role is and the scope of its role. And I want to tell you that, and this is my disclaimer for this evening, I've been talking to Mr. Helmeski about coming here for months. So I'm not here tonight as a result of the decision in Mr. Shaflin's case or anything that occurred with regards to Mr. Shaflin's case. But I listened to that intently, and I don't want you to take these comments that's any reflection on whatever the board did in that case, because frankly I know nothing about it, because it's before your board and I haven't really paid any attention to it. But I did hear the chairman say, gee, we're in the middle of addressing amendments to our code, and to incorporate things like conduct not becoming a public official. Well, respectfully, there are provisions in the law, for instance, a zoning board member. There's a provision in the law that says that zoning board members can be removed for cause by the township council. Now, the lawyer will tell you, and this is something you can go into closed session to talk to him about, that there's a theory in law that's called preemption. And that is when the legislature says that the council has the authority to remove a zoning board member for cause, that means that nobody else can usurp that power, because the legislature has determined that that's the method for that process to take place. And my suggestion to you is that if you read the New Jersey local government ethics law, and I have, and I I was one of those people who practiced law representing municipalities before there was a local government ethics law, so I remember what the bad old days were like. It talks really about financial and other interests that arise to a level of a conflict. It is not a moral code. And whether we need or don't need a moral code, that's a different story. But my suggestion to you is that things that might otherwise be not conflicts, which may rise to the level of, for instance, conduct on becoming a zoning board member. And one of my thoughts would be is that if a zoning board member in the middle of an application conducted himself in a way using vulgarity or was, you know, we lawyers deal with things like sexual harassment and inappropriate conduct. If they did something like that in the middle of a meeting, that'd be cause to remove them. But it wouldn't violate the local government ethics law, because unless they had a conflict with regards to the application or were acting on a matter that was otherwise created a conflict, it wouldn't be an ethics board matter. And I'm here today because I think that the issue with Mr. Is it Wilson or Wilson's appointment, the way it came back to me at least, and I'm happy to take questions from the board, was that there was a concern that somehow there were matters that would be where you would be reviewing conduct with regards to something in the purview of the Recreation Commission that would somehow create a conflict from Mr. Wilson. And I'm not really sure what that could be, other than if he acted, for instance, if he acted on a contract before the Recreation Commission in which he had a personal interest, he would be subject to your jurisdiction. But in all due respect, that would be the same thing that would happen if one of you voted on a contract, and you have a volunteer attorney, and I think that's terrific. But if you have the right to hire an attorney, you do. You have the right to select your own independent counsel. If one of you voted on a contract for a law firm in which maybe they represented you, or you had a financial interest, or one of your relatives was employed there, one of you might have a conflict. And this board would have to hear that conflict. That's really no different than what would happen with Mr. Wilson. If, in fact, however, the board feels that there are items that somehow they see themselves as the review board for things that happen before the Recreation Commission, or to mediate disputes between coaches in Little League teams, that's a concern, because that truly is not within your jurisdiction. And I'm sensing that maybe that really is that there's a concern that you're going to go into an area with the Recreation Commission that probably is outside of your jurisdiction. So I came here tonight because I consider all, every one of these boards is all part of the municipal family. And while I'm the director of law, and it's generally my responsibility to oversee all of the township's legal affairs, you do have an independent attorney. But I have the same relationship with your attorney that I have with the independent attorney on the planning board and the zoning board and the other boards, which is that we try to make sure that everybody's on the same page, because we're all part of the same thing. And I kind of felt bad standing up here and talking tonight, because I feel like you came here and got lectured by everybody, and that's certainly not my intent. But I am here to answer questions, because I know the board had questions, but I wanted to tell you what my frame of reference was in coming here. So I really am here to see if I can answer your questions. Maybe you can tell me, Mr. Chairman, what the concern was.
First of all, thank you for your time, and I appreciate what you're doing for us. And we are here to learn from your expertise, so I appreciate that very much. I'm not an attorney. Okay.
You're apparently the only one in the room who's not.
Well,
no. Okay, well, maybe I was wrong.
There are a few of us. We had a previous member of our board, founding member of the ethics board, who's unfortunately now deceased, was a retired labor relations attorney.
Right.
And while serving on this board, he was also appointed to the, I believe it's called the
Mayor's Transition Committee.
No, it wasn't for the financial. I have the name of my.
An ad hoc commission established by the mayor.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I don't remember the sequence of events, but I recall that he had, the administration decided he had to resign from that other board.
The Citizens Advisory Committee.
Was that it?
Yeah.
Okay.
That the Citizens Advisory Committee for the Zoning and Planning Board?
No, it was the mayor's advisory committee.
Okay.
So with that precedent set in the town with the current administration, we were not questioning who the mayor could appoint by any means. We were questioning whether another individual who was appointed to the board, who we welcome, who has great expertise in many matters that will come before us. We were never questioning him personally. What we were questioning was whether or not, since the township has told us in the past that the late Mr. Rosen, Stanley Rosen, couldn't serve on both boards. So now we were being presented with a similar issue, and we were saying that, well, if that happened to us before, maybe that's happening to us again, and we would not want anything that came before the board to be withdrawn because there was a member who was potentially in a conflict.
I'm not really certain as to what the circumstances were of the other appointment and why that was, but I know that as far as the local government ethics law is concerned, it's not inappropriate. And I know that boards across the state have different. Sometimes in Marlboro, which is one of the things that I find, I represent big and little municipalities all across the state, and medium-sized ones too. And there's no place like Marlboro in terms of being able to get volunteers. I represent some municipalities, and this is June now, and they still carry every month reorganization items because they can't find people to fill boards. You guys, you're pretty lucky that you can. In those other places, it's not unusual for people to serve on multiple boards and be on the ethics board. It's a pretty common practice. And I assume that the mayor makes that judgment kind of on an appointment-by-appointment basis as to how it is that that determination is made. And it very well may be with regards to Mr. Rosen, who I don't know, and I don't know the circumstances, that because of whatever his other role is, the mayor felt that it would be better for him not to be on this board or not to serve in both capacities. I think the mayor's judgment is that with regards to somebody who serves on the Recreation Commission is it doesn't have that kind of connection. First, it's let's call it quasi-independent. It's funded by the town. It's a statutory board. The statute allows for the creation of recreation commissions, gives them delegated authority in the operation of recreation programs. And I guess the mayor's judgment, and it is his judgment to make, and the council's judgment to make, is that was, there wasn't any potential there for him having to be conflicted out of anything. So
Could you think of any potential scenario that I should be aware of as chairman of involving the recreation board? Is there anything at all that could potentially?
No. Once again,
if a complaint is made against the recreation board.
Well, the answer is this: is that you have a statutory framework that deals with officers and employees of the municipality. I'm not even sure. If you're on a board that can expend funds, you probably fall under that category. If you are a volunteer coach in town, for instance, I'm not even sure that that the local government ethics law would even govern what you do or you don't do, because you don't have any actual authority to spend money. You don't have the ability to vote. You don't have the ability to award a contract. You don't manage or supervise a township employee. So the answer is that the only people really that are governed are the members of the Recreation Commission. And so I can't imagine a circumstance where you would review something that Mr. Wolfson also reviewed by the Recreation Committee. It's hard for me to understand that. You're not like the super board over top of everybody's board. So I'm not really sure. I guess somebody would have to tell me, since I don't see that there's a conflict and the statute permits it. I can't imagine the circumstance.
Maybe you could just enlighten us to
who's covered under the board.
There's a very clear list, and by the way, you're right, coaches and such people are not included.
Sure, right.
But the officers who are covered under this are listed very specifically, and in that sense, they are covered by the
Sure.
ethics code in our
They are.
jurisdiction.
They are. And
Recreation commissioners are included.
correct. And if any one of them personally did something, you would get, oh, I'm certainly covered. I'm a local government officer.
So are the members of this board
Sure.
listed?
Yes,
Which,
yes.
So that's what I'm saying.
which means they're all in the same position
Exactly.
as rec commissioners, which
Correct.
is if somebody filed a complaint against Rabbi Weber or Dr. Cowley or me, obviously, we would not hear and determine a complaint filed against us.
Correct.
But that potential for a conflict is neither an actual conflict nor something that disqualifies you from sitting on this board, which the statute couldn't make clearer by saying that 4 of the 6 members can in fact be local government officers.
And there's a theory of statutory construction, which I always found humorous because I actually worked in the legislature for 8 years, that the legislature is presumed to know what all of its laws are. The legislature knows how to restrict appointments to non-officials of the municipality because it does it all the time. The zoning board, for instance, unlike the planning board, who has the mayor on it, a township employee, and a member of the council, the zoning board, you can't be an official of the municipality to be on it. So the legislature knows how to do that. They could have very easily said that they all have to be members of the public. It's not unusual for these kind of boards. It's, for instance, the board that governs, that regulates attorneys, has a provision on it that they have to have a certain number of public members, but the others are attorneys. So somebody would say, well, gee, how does an attorney regulate another attorney? Well, that's why there's public members there, and the assumption that the legislature, and in that case the Supreme Court made, was that there are people who are on the board that sometimes bring knowledge to them that are helpful.
I think the issues, first of all, the board, through my counsel, and generally understands that they can't question the appointment by the mayor. So there's no trigger or approval by the board. Whoever he picks, and that's the way life is.
Right.
The issue is in some of the statutes, some of the case law, where it says the standard is where in the established governmental scheme, one office is subordinate to another, or subject to its supervision or control, or the duties clash, inviting the incumbent to prefer one obligation to another. There's another case that says the incompatibility has been said to exist when there's a built-in right of the holder of one position to interfere with that of the other, as when the one is subordinate to or subject to audit or review by the second. So the concern with Mr. Rosen, and now here, the concern was, you're right, anyone can have a conflict. That's true. But if the board, the recreation board is under investigation, maybe probably in all likelihood, obviously Mr. Wolfson had nothing to do with it. He still has facts, evidence, he becomes now a material witness to an investigation. So I feel we wanted to have clarity from the mayor that he's looked at these issues, he's fine with the appointment, and I think the board is happy to move on. But that's why it came to you.
And the doctrine of incompatibility of offices is an interesting and complex document, but let me give you the most recent example of a case concerning that. The mayor of Wildwood Township, Wildwood Borough, I guess it was, gets elected. He's a police officer. He takes a leave of absence as a police officer, and once he's elected as mayor. The court said you cannot be the mayor and a police officer, even one on leave of absence, because the mayor is the chief executive officer of the municipality, and a police officer is an employee. So the positions of police officer and elected official, mayor in that case, are incompatible. That's because the mayor supervises all of the employees of the municipality. And the same thing would go for the council, who supervises the employees of a municipality. That's very different than every local government officer and employee, including all of you, have a code of ethics you have to follow, and this board hears those opinions. You have no right, you have no control over how the Recreation Commission
conducts its business, who they hire, who they fire, how many people they employ at the Recreation Commission, whether they have arts and crafts programs or they don't. You have no control over the supervision of them whatsoever.
Well, we have a right to hear a complaint against.
You certainly have that very limited right to do that. But what you can't do, and if you are doing, you shouldn't be doing, is saying the Recreation Commission decided that they were going to spend more money on soccer this year than they did on baseball, and you think that that's not appropriate because there's a lot more kids who play soccer than baseball, and you think the money should be spent in a different way. If you had that authority, that might be a different circumstance. But you don't really have that authority. So the answer is that incompatibility of office doctrine, and once again, the legislature knows how to figure those things out too. I mean, there's very specific statutes about what for instance, a freeholder can do. Less specific statutes about what a member of the governing body in a municipality can do. Just now, they've begun to get around to things like dual office holding laws. But the answer is that it's never been, by the way, it's never been applied in this context. Because if it did, it would defeat the first thing that you have to look to in making that determination is whether or not it's permitted by law. It would only be if there was nothing in the law about public and non-public members. I would say, well, maybe we could have a discussion, though I still don't think it applies because you don't supervise. There's no circumstances under which you supervise or regulate or review the decisions of the Board of Recreation Commissioners. You may determine whether or not one of them act improperly, but it's never the entire board. It's always because you don't regulate the ethics of the board. You only regulate the ethics and rule on the ethics of each of the individual members. So as a practical matter, you never review you never review the actions of your Recreation Commissioner. If you were awarded a contract, you know, so that's the issue. And once again, I just caution you because I think that you have an important process and there are important things that need to come before you, and you can kind of get lost in the wilderness if you start to worry about, gee, you know, what's the Recreation Commission doing on any given day?
Thanks for explaining that to us. We appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I hope I didn't sound like I was lecturing you because I certainly didn't mean to do that.
We were actually called in on the issue of how a coach treated people, and we said we have.
And that's a great example.
Nothing.
You know,
Twice.
Yeah. And
maybe 3 times.
And I would suggest that there is, you know, conduct unbecoming is something that somebody uses, and we discipline employees for that all the time, and that is you know, there's the employees of this municipality have civil service protections, and conduct unbecoming a public employee is something that we can discipline people for. It's not something you can discipline people for, because that's an authority that's left to the appointing authority in the municipality, which happens to be the mayor and the business administrator. Likewise, conduct unbecoming a planning board member, there's a way to deal with that. You go to the town council, and they have the right to remove a member for that. If the conduct rises to the level of a conflict, then that's where you guys come in.
The town council in the past has asked us our advisory opinion.
And they can do that, and that's also an appropriate role by you, and that is true, and it's something that they should do, and certainly it's something that I always encourage them to do. So thank you.
Thank you. Very nice. Thank you very much. I feel better too. Settle in, Brian's going to be good.
I thought this had been resolved in February. Honestly, I was very surprised. I know, I was very surprised to see it on today's agenda.
Okay, well, now it's settled.
Mr. Wilson, welcome.
Again.
It feels like you've been here already.
And we have a question, your request question, potential conflict because of what we were advised in the past.
Can I ask a request that what are the causes or reasons to go into executive session?
Yeah, I'll give you that.
Yeah, please, so at least when we ask,
we have it.
be aware.
We should be more clear on
Yes,
that.
if you could send that out to us, that would be great.
Yeah, it's right here.
Because we're not attorneys. Some of us, I'm not.
Anything else?
Some might be. So.
Anything else?
Any good in welfare?
Okay. What do you think?
Move to adjourn.
Second? Discussion? All in favor?